Well, hello again. Hey, this is kind of like the old days. This is like the old days. Gonna start doing some of these question and answer videos using my smartphone out in the wild in a more natural setting. I don't know, there's something about talking about technology with the chirps of birds in the background. It's just kind of cool, at least I think. Anyway, so this comes from the forum on elithecomputerguy.com, from the account That Was a Cool Trick. Yo, I plan on enlisting in the Air Force this coming September. What are the chances I die, end up broken homeless because I'm 17 going on 18 in less than a month, and I have plenty of internships available, but I want to get out of state and out of the house? So basically, more or less the question here, is it a good idea to go into the Air Force, especially from that IT technical standpoint? And honestly, there's not I don't see a lot of downsides going to the Air Force. I mean, basically, the downside of going into the Air Force is you're signing a 4+ year contract. That's the downside, right? So if you don't have anything better to do for 4 years, it would be a good thing to do. If you're not sure you're up for signing a 4-year contract, it might not be a good thing to do. But that's really the downside. It is important to understand that when you enlist in the military, one thing that people seem to like goes over a lot of people's heads is you're enlisting in the military. You do have to understand. I mean, the industry of the military is warfare. It is killing. So you just have to kind of keep that in mind. But on the other hand, going into the Air Force, you're probably going to be about as separated from any kind of killing as you could possibly be. So again, like if you go into the Army, if you go into the Marines, and another 9/11 event happens, there's a good chance you'll be going to some bad place and having to deal with bad people. The reality is how the Air Force works, right? They send their aircraft over the bad places, drop their bombs or do their surveillance, and then go back home. So the reality is most of the people that deal with the actual warfare in the Air Force, again, are pilots. They're relatively separated from what's actually going on. And then everybody else is back at the Air Force bases. And that's one of the interesting things. You can literally have aircraft take off from the continental United States, go do a bombing mission, half the planet, almost half a world away, and then come back home. And so as far as the whole idea that it might be you might die or it might be dangerous, not really as far as the Air Force is concerned. Again, maybe if you're a pilot in war, maybe. And if you're pararescue, I mean, hey, you gotta give credit where it's due. Pararescue, those guys are some guys, and I don't know if there's girls in pararescue right now, but anyways, those folks are badasses. So if you go into pararescue, there might be some harm, but otherwise, as far as safety is concerned, in the Air Force, you should be relatively safe, regardless in peacetime or wartime. Beyond that, one of the things you should be thinking about is the training that you're going to go into. I did a little bit of research on this beforehand. It is important to understand that the different services deal with things like MOS or whatever your job specialty is differently. So when you go into the Army, at least when I went into the Army, I went into a specific MOS, military occupational specialty. So basically when I signed my contract, I knew exactly what I was going to be trained for, and I knew exactly what my job, more or less, exactly what my job was going to be. Different services don't necessarily work the same way. When I took a look at the Air Force, you can go in under a specific job, or you can go into, it's like a field. I was in electronics. So when I signed up in the Army, I went for a particular MOS. This is your MOS. This is what you're going to get trained for. In the Air Force, one of the ways they deal with it is it's more, they have like the electronic repair field. And then depending upon their needs, when you get through their version of basic training, you'll go to whatever they decide. So one person may go off to do radio repair, one person might go off to do encryption stuff, another person might go off to do, kind of avionics work, right? It's all within electronics, but you're not necessarily sure what job you're going to get. So that would be the only thing that I would be a little bit careful about, is just trying to go in and trying to make sure you get a decent job specialty. Because again, with electronic repair, I mean, that's right. I went through I had what, 800-900 hours of training. My MOS was like seven plus months of training. And the thing is, like in electronics repair, you had electronics training that was anywhere from 9 months. So that was long, all the way down to 2 months. So we were all within electronics repair, but some of us got a hell of a lot more training than others. So I think that would be one of the things that I would be thinking about. But otherwise, I have to say, at least as far as the Army was concerned, the Army was the best technical training I could have ever possibly gotten. That sounds a little weird because none of the equipment translates into the real world. Everything that I was trained on. There's no civilian world equivalent, but that wasn't really the important thing. Again, a lot of people get really focused on certifications, like I'm qualified. And the thing is with the Army training is it's not that I came out in the civilian world and knew how to fix anything or much in the civilian world. It was that they taught me how to troubleshoot. They taught me how to think. They taught me how to deal with documentation. They taught me process. Right, and that's one of the big problems you have with a lot of noobs is even if they get the certification, even if they get the MCSE, they don't know process, they don't know workflow, they don't know how to talk to people, they don't know how to deal with stressful situations. Right, there's so much of being a technology professional that has nothing to do with configuration files. That's one of the frustrating things dealing with noobs is they hyper focus on configuration files. They act like the configuration file is it. I will get paid a lot of money if I know how to do one configuration file. And it's, yeah, I mean, you do need to know how to configure your equipment, but at the end of the day, that might actually only be about 25% of your work. Talking with people, documentation, doing all this other kind of stuff can be the very important thing. So as far as all of that's concerned, if you want to go into the Air Force, again, yeah, no. The only downside with the Air Force, as far as being a military branch, it is one of the nicest military branches, right? Chair Force, as they call it. And one of the issues you get into is if you want to do it for a career. So that's one thing to be thinking about. If you're going to go in for your 4 years, I don't really see any downside. If you're going to go for a career, though, one of the problems with the Air Force is that people don't leave, right? So when I was in the Army, you normally go up. And so if you retire out of the Army after 20 years, you'll be either an E7 or an E8. That's just normal. So E7 is probably normal. So you might be an E8. You'll probably be an E7. If you're an E5, if you retire from the Army as an E5, it basically means you're half a moron. You're half a moron, or you're a bad boy, or a bad girl, or you did something wrong. Right? Because the reason is because basically the E levels, E1 is private, it's E1, E2, E3, E4, going on and so forth. And so the thing is they have so much churn, they have so much turnover within the force, because, the Army is hard, that it's easy to go up the ranks. Because, right, any job, you can only get promoted into a vacant position. So in the Army, people leave. A lot of people leave, and so moving up the ranks is relatively easy. So if you retire as an E5, it was really bizarre situation. Whereas in the Air Force, I've actually known quite a few people to retire as E5s, and when I talked with them, I'd sit there and I'd look at them and be like, I don't know, you seem pretty normal. You don't seem like an idiot. Why? How in God's name can you do 20 years in the Air Force and come out as an E5? And they said the problem is because the Air Force was such a good environment that a lot of people go into the Air Force and then they don't leave. Right? So if people aren't leaving, then that means positions don't open up, and therefore you may retire as an E5 after 20 years. And again, the difference between an E5's retirement and benefits and all that versus an E7's retirements and benefits can be quite significant, especially also things too, like with a leadership opportunity, because like in Air Force, I get confused with it, but like in the Army, so E1 and E2 are private, E3 is a PFC, E4 is either a corporal or specialist, E5 is a sergeant, E6 is a staff sergeant, E7. It's been a while. Maybe I'm getting those confused. Anyway, you know what I'm saying? Go up the rank. And so that's one thing, too, is like when the Army, you may get a lot more leadership opportunity because you get to rise up the ranks of the positions, whereas in the Air Force, you may be a little bit more stuck, but it's a more technical thing. So, yeah, that would be the only downside with the Air Force is just that whole career development if you want to do 20 years. But for 4, can't see any downside. So those are my thoughts. If you're going to go in the Air Force, go, have fun. Don't do anything horribly stupid. And if anybody there has any more questions, think about going to the forum at elithecomputerguy.com. See you folks later.